Imagine standing in the middle of a silent desert. The ground beneath your feet is cracked, parched, and lifeless. There's nothing but dry earth stretching for miles. And yet, across this barren landscape, you see something that makes no sense at all. Huge stones, some weighing hundreds of pounds, have carved long, winding trails through the desert floor, as if they've been moving on their own. But there's no one here. No trucks, no machinery, no footprints. Nothing. Just heavy rocks that somehow appear to have slid across the ground, leaving their signature marks behind. For nearly a century, these strange sailing stones have baffled scientists, explorers, and conspiracy theorists alike. How could such massive rocks travel dozens or even hundreds of feet, all by themselves, in one of the harshest environments on Earth? Was it the work of nature, or something else? This is the story of one of the strangest natural mysteries in the world, the sailing stones of Death Valley. The legend begins in a place called Racetrack Playa, a flat, dry lakebed tucked deep inside California's Death Valley National Park. On the surface, Racetrack Playa doesn't look like much. It's about 3 miles long, 2 miles wide, surrounded by mountain ranges that cut it off from the rest of the desert. Most of the year it's nothing more than a lifeless plain of cracked mud. But if you walk across it carefully, you'll notice something bizarre. Heavy boulders, scattered randomly across the playa, each leaving behind a track in the dried earth, sometimes stretching hundreds of feet long. Some tracks are straight, others curve or zigzag wildly. Sometimes two rocks move parallel for a while, then suddenly split off in different directions. And strangest of all, no one has ever seen the stones in motion with their own eyes. For decades, they only appeared to move when no one was watching. People would leave the playa, come back days later, and the rocks would be in a different place. That mystery sparked endless theories. In the 1940s, a geologist named Joseph Kirk first studied the phenomenon seriously. He proposed that strong winds might be pushing the rocks across the playa, but even back then, people doubted it. Some of the stones weighed over 600 pounds. Could the wind alone really move something that heavy? Others thought perhaps the playa briefly flooded, and the rocks floated across the surface. But again, rocks don't float. Then came the wilder theories. Maybe earthquakes nudged the rocks along. Maybe magnetic forces from the Earth's core were pulling them. And of course, there were the whispers of the paranormal, UFOs, spirits, even mischievous desert tricksters. The sailing stones became one of those enduring mysteries. Scientists wanted an explanation. Tourists came to see the phenomenon with their own eyes. But still, no one actually caught the rocks in motion. Then, in the 1970s, two geologists named Bob Sharp and Dwight Carey decided to tackle the problem directly. They adopted several stones, giving them names like Karen, Marianne, and Ida, and tracked their movements for 7 years. They marked the positions carefully, even placing stakes in the ground to measure any shifts. And slowly, they gathered data. Some stones barely moved at all. Others traveled hundreds of feet. One stone named Marianne traveled almost 800 feet during the study period. But frustratingly, Sharp and Carey never actually saw a stone move. It was as if the desert was taunting them. The mystery remained unsolved. By the 1990s, scientists began to suspect ice might play a role. During rare rains, Racetrack Playa can briefly flood, leaving a shallow layer of water. If the desert got cold enough at night, perhaps thin sheets of ice formed around the rocks. When the sun rose and the ice began to break apart, maybe the stones were pushed along by floating sheets of ice, their weight sliding over the softened mud beneath. It was a neat theory, but again, no one had ever witnessed it happening. And so, the legend of the sailing stones grew. Some scientists even gave up trying to explain it, dismissing the stones as a harmless oddity, something that might never truly be understood. But then, in 2011, a pair of researchers, Richard Norris and his cousin James Norris, decided to crack the case once and for all. They brought modern technology with them, time-lapse cameras, weather stations, and GPS trackers attached directly to the rocks. They set everything up across Racetrack Playa and waited. For months, nothing happened. The stones remained still, as stubborn as ever. But then, in December 2013, Nature finally cooperated. The playa flooded after a rainstorm. Overnight, a thin sheet of ice, just a few millimeters thick, froze across the water's surface. When the sun rose the next morning, the ice began to crack. Gentle breezes pushed massive sheets of ice across the shallow water. And, astonishingly, the rocks began to move. Slowly, gracefully, almost imperceptibly. The GPS trackers showed rocks drifting several inches per second, carried forward by the ice sheets. As the ice broke apart, the rocks left trails etched in the soft mud beneath the shallow water. The mystery, after nearly a century, had been solved. But even with a scientific explanation, the phenomenon remains mesmerizing. It requires a perfect combination of conditions. Just the right amount of rain, a cold enough night to freeze the surface, and just enough wind to move the ice sheets. Too much or too little of any one factor, and the stones remain still. That's why the sailing stones are so rare, and why they went unobserved for so long. Yet even now, there are questions. If the stones only move under ice, why do some tracks curve so dramatically, as if the stones had minds of their own? Why do some rocks travel together for long stretches, only to suddenly diverge? And why, after so many decades, did it take until 2013 for someone to witness it directly? For many, the mystery of the sailing stones is more than just a scientific puzzle. It's a symbol of nature's ability to surprise us. In one of the harshest, most inhospitable places on Earth, rocks seem to come alive, moving across the desert like slow travelers with destinations unknown. The sailing stones also remind us of something deeper. That not every mystery is meant to be solved quickly. Sometimes the world forces us to wait, to observe, to respect the pace of nature. For nearly 100 years, the desert kept its secret, until finally revealing it on its own terms. And perhaps that's why the story of the sailing stones continues to fascinate us today. It's not just about rocks moving in the desert. It's about the boundary between the explainable and the unexplainable. About how even the simplest objects, a rock, a trail, a patch of mud, can spark wonder, fear, and imagination. So the next time you hear a sound in the night or see something you can't explain, remember the sailing stones. Sometimes the truth is stranger and far more beautiful than the mystery itself. Because in Death Valley, the rocks really do move.